All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. And today we have Leena Yousefi joining us. Leena is a multi-award winning family lawyer and the founder of Y Law, the fastest growing female-led law firm in British Columbia. She has been chosen as one of the top 25 most influential lawyers in Canada and one of Business in Vancouver's top 40 under 40. So thank you, Leena, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, Leena, perhaps maybe you can give a bit about your background in terms of how you got to where you are today, and share with my students. First of all, why did you get into law to begin with?
I was I was kicked out of university, and my parents had basically given up, and I just didn't really have any goals or dreams. And I just remember one day waking up and being like, you know what, like I got to do something else, and I have to basically finally like become responsible and go after my dream. And I kind of asked myself a lot of questions about where my abilities and strengths lie. At that time, my sister had applied to medical school, and our personalities were so different, and she always said that I'm really good at arguing with her. So I was like, hey, let's give law a chance. And that was it. So I basically got my admittance back to law school very within a couple of years. I just put my head down and I took all my undergrad courses. I got an like A+ GPA, going from like an F in the first 2 years and being kicked out of university to like A+. And then that kind of change, I think, proved to law schools that I was capable. And I was admitted to University of Victoria. I finished my law degree there, and then I realized that I started working as a lawyer, and then I realized I just wanted to do things my own way, and I didn't want to be really in like any sort of like corporate or bureaucratic environment. So I started my own law firm, and I do things very, very differently than most other law firms. And so far, it's been a very successful and gratifying experience.
So perhaps you could expand on that post-law school, right, of working in a sort of firm environment, and then why you decided, well, hey, I want to do things on my own and I want to have my own practice.
Yeah, there were just so many things that I saw as being wrong with the traditional law firm. Women who, for example, wanted to get married and have kids were not looked at as an asset. I did the management side. I didn't like, because there seemed to be a lot of drama and gossip and, people being against each other. It was an extremely competitive environment where if you were preferred over another lawyer, you would get backstabbed. And this is not just where I worked at. This was the story with almost every big law firm that I knew. So I was just like, look, like the job that we have is already very, very stressful. We don't have to have a stressful work environment. And I also saw a lot of how lawyers were like this hierarchical situation where lawyers were at the top and the support staff were below us or at the bottom. And that made no sense to me, because I would be nothing without my paralegal, who's like my sister and my best friend. And I felt like they really needed to be celebrated and praised. And that wasn't happening. It was like, your worth was based on how much money you were going to bring in. It was kind of like, I'm talking doom and gloom, but it was. So I just felt like it had come to a point where if I wanted to be a good lawyer and have a positive outcome for my clients, I needed to be in a positive environment. And that environment was not presented to me. So I had to build it myself. That was the very reason I went out on my own. It wasn't easy, because I started as a sole practitioner in a very small office share space, no security, just had to kind of believe that things are going to work out. And again, like I think at least 50% of why I made it was my paralegal. If she wasn't there to help me and make sure that, we're running together as a team, then I definitely wouldn't be here today.
Now, you mentioned you do things differently. So can you perhaps share what your focus on is in your practice, and how you do things differently from that traditional model that you were sharing wasn't working for you?
Yeah. So we actively go and try and hire women who just had children. I think they're the biggest assets, especially to family law when you have your own children. And I believe they have superpowers. You know, becoming a mother is one of the toughest things to do. So I think they're assets. We actively go after single moms who are raising kids on their own, because I think they're extremely powerful. We go after different cultures. So every one of our lawyers and staff are from a different culture. You know, one of our lawyers is from Senegal. There's another one who's Jewish, Indian. I'm Persian. You know, we got the token white lawyer there as well. Our staff and assistants get higher bonuses than our lawyers do, and they also get up to $1,500 a year just to spend on going to the spa or taking a vacation or booking a hotel. So, you know, it's just like, hey, here's this money, take a vacation, feel better, because you know the work environment is stressful sometimes. We just believe that our law firm is really a spa. So if a client comes in, we try to make them feel comfortable and give them solutions, instead of, you know, saying, oh yeah, we're gonna fight everybody. And, you know, like, we don't, like, you know, if you look at our interior design, it's very white, kind of like apple white environment, instead of this intimidating, look at me, I'm a lawyer in a black suit and, you know, a red tie, and I'm here to intimidate you. So what really, like, in a way, like, in one sentence, I would say that I believe in female. I'm not a feminist in the sense that I think everything should be feminine and female led, but I do think that we're missing some female leadership qualities, such as nurturing, such as, you know, organic growth, such as community and giving and involvement, you know, instead of being aggressive and exclusive and hierarchical and things like that. So that's what I would say sets us apart. Sorry.
Now, I think last month you won an award there from the Globe and Mail's top 400
Yeah.
growing companies here in Canada. What would you attribute to the success of such an unprecedented growth in such a short period of time?
It's a combination of different factors, but what I really attribute to it is not being afraid and taking risks. I took a lot of risks. For example, you know, like, if you're a typical client and you want to have a lawyer represent you, you may go after, you know, the guy who has gray hair and, you know, big glasses and things like that. Like, in our firm, we're all young. The oldest one of us is 38, so it would be difficult to get clients when you're only in your 30s as a lawyer, and you're going to be representing, you know, people who potentially are worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. So, you know, our branding was, yeah, we're young, but we have so much energy. We work as a team. We're collaborators. You know, we do everything together. Look at us, give us a chance, and we're gonna give you a better outcome than your typical lawyer. You know, like, it was all kind of like trying to break through all of these assumptions and stigmas that are carried if you're not the typical lawyer that people see, you know, on TV or whatever. So I think, you know, my life from morning to night is, you know, waking up being afraid of failure, and by noon I accept that, you know, there might be failure, and then at night being prepared to tackle the risk and be okay that it may fail. And in most cases, thankfully, I haven't failed. We've actually created this new module that's becoming a role model to a lot of other people. So I'm very grateful. And I think Globe and Mail chose to profile us because, as they said, they thought that we were a kinder, gentler law firm. And when it comes to divorces and family and kids, aggression and fighting is only going to destroy, even if you end up winning. This is something that I saw after years of practicing law and being a massive litigator who fought everything. I just saw loss and destruction. So I'm hoping that we're setting ground for other family law firms, especially, to learn that family law is really not about winning or losing. Even though you end up in court, it's about resolving problems amicably, collaboratively. So that's what we're really focusing on right now.
And being a women-led firm there, what challenges and opportunities do you have in your experience for women in family law out there in BC that you've seen and hope to continue to push for in terms of opportunities for other women looking to enter into the profession?
I don't turn a blind eye to me being a woman, but I also don't focus on I'm a woman, therefore, I'm gonna get all this like discrimination, and I haven't. Like I I just don't entertain it. I don't ask for it. I don't accept people who think that way in my life. I show myself, I reveal who I am, and then I attract people who like me and come to me. But if but I'm just so grateful that I live in a country where I just don't see it every day in my face, because believe me, I've lived in countries where if I said anything that somebody didn't agree with, I could be, facing execution and being killed or being in prison for just advocating even for the simplest, like the most constitutional human rights. So, but, and I hate to say it, but I'm going to be honest, if there has been any sort of hatred or jealousy or discrimination, very unfortunately, it's come from mostly other women. And that's very saddening to me. I wish I could say that, the women that I'm around have been nothing but supportive, and, and they're the biggest source of my success, and some are. But if I can think of anything, any sort of, hating or negative feedback, or, like backstabbing or gossip behind what I've been doing, unfortunately, it's come from women. And I just try to show through my actions that they're not right, and that we should all be working together instead of against each other.
You just mentioned the kinder, gentler law firm approach in family law. Now, a lot of perhaps other firms or other ways of doing it, especially it's very emotional and it's very raw, that there is that need to have this strong litigator who kind of goes and pushes and fights for everything. How have you found this approach when going up maybe against other parties where they're not taking more of that sort of alternative dispute resolution or this kinder, gentler approach? How has that worked, or have you run into any obstacles by being so different?
It's a very, very good question. So there are definitely lawyers in the legal professions that want to fight, and they want to litigate everything, and their clients want to litigate everything. Their clients want to fight, and there are lawyers who just make it a goal not to fight and work things out. And I've always said the path and the direction of a file goes where the lawyer wants to go. So the lawyer is the leader. Like if you're leading, you can tell your client not to go this route, and they won't, in like 99.9% of the time. But if you support them in a destructive route, they will take that route and they'll take it to the end. So what I usually do is that, sometimes at the end of the day, I'm an advocate, right? So if I see a lawyer or a litigant taking advantage of my client, I will fight tooth and nail. I'll fight to the end. But what I do prior to doing that is I exhaust every opportunity to settle. So I beg through letters. Well, not beg, but I ask like 5-6 times, can we have a 4-way meeting? Can we have a mediation? We have this mechanism in BC. I'm not sure if you have in Ontario, where you can actually force mediation. You can serve the other party with a notice to mediate, which forces them into the mediation room. So what I do is I try everything I can to have it settled. But when it comes to a point where I feel like there's absolutely no possibility of settlement, no matter how much I communicate and try, and the only way to resolve it is litigation, then I become the lawyer that my client needs, and I'll litigate. I think a good lawyer is a lawyer who does both, but has the mindset that there's no other way aside from settlement until there is no other way aside from litigation.
So perhaps maybe I know my students just finished learning about alternative dispute resolution and mediation and negotiation and arbitration. Perhaps we can shed some light into how that approach lends itself into mediation in trying to get a resolution, especially when, again, the emotions are running high with a lot of the clients.
It's a situation, sorry, where I didn't think that there would be a media. Sorry, can you repeat your question? I did
Right.
not.
In terms of just maybe outline the mediation process, right? To this kindler, gentler approach of
Hmm.
how does it get resolutions when you have clients who have a lot of emotions, especially going through a divorce,
Hmm.
to get them all to the table and say, let's try to resolve this amicably.
That's a skill that you have to perfect as a lawyer. What I do is I remind them of what they can gain by having control over their destiny and their situation. Like what I remind them is, if you're sitting in a mediation and you're trying to settle something, it's in your hands. The outcome is in your hands. You can call the shots as much as you can, and you can, because you and your ex-partner know what's to your kid's best interest or what's your best interest. And if you can together come to a resolution, then that resolution is going to be way more long lasting. When I go to court and I let a judge decide, generally one person wins, right? But if the other person doesn't agree with what the judge says, or feels like somehow they were harmed, the end of litigation is the beginning of another, because they will come up with all sorts of excuses, all sorts of playing games, like any loopholes to get around what the judge said. So you may experience it like a temporary short-term benefit of feeling like you won, but ultimately you're going to lose, because humans are quite resilient to like, if they truly believe that something should happen a certain way and somebody tries to force them into like their action into something different, they're very resilient to that, even if it's a judge's order. So what I tell my clients is, when you go into mediation, don't think about what I can gain. Think about what I can lose. Because mediation and negotiations are all about compromise. How much am I willing to lose in exchange for gaining a certain future, a collaborative approach, less harm to my child in not having to, like face years of litigation and perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars wasted on lawyers and legal fees that could have gone into an RESP account for my child. So it's really about reminding them of what their priorities are, because a lot of times those emotions are blinding them to their long-term future. They just see here, and you have to kind of like open up those ways and like show them what's to their better interest. And a lot of times they agree with you if you actually explain it to them properly and get them to think rationally.
Now, do you personally find it difficult having to deal with a lot of these emotional cases and having to navigate situations, again, essentially where uh, there may be so much at stake, and there's again a lot of that emotional aspect. Does it play a toll on you at all, or do you have to kind of look at things objectively and uh, and kind of fight your way through that?
Look, like there's different types of family lawyers, and I find that if you and I don't, this is just a generalization based on my own experience, but I find that men who are family lawyers tend to do a lot better emotionally, because they they become the lawyer, they do their job, they go home, and most times they can separate the emotions, and if they think about their cases, it's usually about, okay, how do I resolve this case, instead of getting emotionally involved. In my experience, I get extremely involved emotionally in my cases. It's kind of like, if my client loses, that means I've lost. If they lose their children, it's as though I'm losing my child. So what's that done is that it's caused me to win pretty much all my cases, because I have to win, and so I stay late at night. I think things over 100 times. I talk to 100 people. I try to get the best outcome. And like when I go in front of a judge, like that passion, that like conviction comes out in such intense degree that in a lot of times, like those judges actually like believe me and my story and my client's story. But what that did to me is it caused severe anxiety, insomnia, migraines, panic attacks, just an extremely unhealthy mindset, to the point that I remember at some points, like at nights, as I was like as I was falling asleep, I would feel this jolt in my heart, like it would start beating, and I would just wake up and I'd be wide alert, and this would happen all night. And I can't tell you how painful that was, that, you're about to go into like dreamland. And because you've had so much anxiety, your body feels like, it needs to wake you up and take you into survival mode. So what that did is that's the last panic attack I had that was work related, was I think in 2017. That's when at that time I was going to court like twice a day. I had like 70 clients dealing with 70 different divorces. They were all my best friends. Everybody thought that I was the best lawyer because I took so much on, but I was literally killing myself. So I just decided to like stop doing that. I started taking files that were more settlement oriented, that were less acrimonious. I shifted my mindset in, helping my clients go the settlement route, because if that was the stress I was experiencing, I could only imagine what my clients were going through. So long and short of it is, there are lawyers who can do very acrimonious high conflict cases because they tend to separate themselves a little bit from the case, which I think is healthy to an extent. And there are lawyers like me who can be very successful because they become their own clients. But there's definitely a trade-off. And I think the art of being a family lawyer is to find that balance. And 99% of family lawyers never do. So there you go.
So yeah, so there was a question here from one of the students about transitioning between work time and personal time. So related to that, how since 2017, how have you coped a bit better with maybe handling the off time from work?
I never did. I'm not gonna like walk around it. Like the concept of work-life balance, when you're a young, like junior lawyer, like for example, I was a family law litigator. I had my own company. I had to pay my staff, and I had to win my cases. So those were my priorities, in order to, and so I had to work. I had to pay my dues. Once I became more stable, once I settled down, once I got my firm going, and I started doing the settlement files, after maybe 5 or 6 years, that's when I found my work-life balance. That's when I was able to have enough flexibility and room to do what I wanted to do. But the ultimate work-life balance to me came when I had my daughter. When I had my daughter, I just, everything fell into balance. I still to this day, I'm the happiest I've been. I work about 5 hours a day only, 5 days a week, which is like only 25 hours. Having two law firms and being a family lawyer and only working 25 hours a week is not an easy task, but somehow it's happening. So, for professionals, we're getting paid, and we're doing, years and years of education, because we're doing something that a lot of other people can't do. And a part of being a professional is working hard. I think that in the first few years, you have to pay your dues. You have to be mentally ready that, yeah, I'm going to be working extra hours. And as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to do my workout and exercising. But I'm not going to expect a 9 to 4 or 9 to 5 in the first few years. I think it would be unrealistic for somebody to say, as a very junior lawyer, articling student, or a first year lawyer, you can only work 9 to 5, and you're going to make it really far. Unfortunately or fortunately, that's just not the way our profession is made right now. But there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel.
So now with your daughter, how are you managing everything with the 25-hour work week? How's everything going on in the firm, and what have you seen with that change now from what you were doing before, and having more time for your family?
Um, I it's kind of like, because I put so much effort in the first few years of being a lawyer, by the time she came, and I had her when I late, I was like 36 years old when I had her, and I'm 38. So by the time I decided to have her, I had already set up everything so that I could reduce my work. I had delegated my work to other lawyers. I was in charge of the two law firms, but I had all these like contractors and service providers who were willing to help me. So, a day of my life right now is, I wake up at 6:30 a.m. and I take care of her till noon. And I come to work at noon at 12 and I put my head down. I don't think I'll even take a minute off. I buy my lunch before I come in. I milk every single minute of every day. I go home, put my purse down, grab my daughter, cook with her, put her to bed at 7:30 and then just like crash on the couch by 9 and maybe take like half an hour to 45 minutes of just like laying on the couch and talking to my husband, and then I'm in bed. I think it's a whole lot of efficiency that I find is really helping. Like previously I would be working 12, 14 hours, but there was a lot of procrastination. So one of the biggest things I've learned from having my daughter, which I hope everybody else applies without having kids even, is how to become super efficient with your time. If you become efficient, then you can find a lot of free time to do things that matter to you. I just procrastinated too much on social media or checking my phone or hanging out, talking to people. Once I made a schedule about, this is what I'm going to do during a day, then things became a lot more efficient and productive.
I just want to take a quick pause here if there's any of the students who have any questions. I see one that just popped up there about your efficiency. So what tips do you have about becoming more efficient? What specifics maybe you can share about, besides putting the phone down, maybe I think something I always, every week when I get that update, like your screen time has gone up by 13%. It's like, well, what can you do?
I'm afraid of even installing those things. I know I'm going to fail so much. It's so there's a few, that's a really good question. And thank you for asking. There's a few things I've done that are really working for me, which I'm going to tell you, but it depends on who you are. Number one, I've been listening to this podcast. It's called Harvard Business Review, where all these like ultra successful people come and like tell us about the secrets to their success. So one of the things I learned was the previous chief operation officer of Facebook. I found this the most valuable. She said, on Mondays, I come to work, I close my door. For the first 10 minutes, I meditate. For the next 10 minutes, I think, and this is the efficiency part. For the next 10 minutes, I think about 3 things that I really would like to get done this week. It doesn't have to be work related. It can be anything. So what I do is when I come to work on Monday, I say, what are the 3 things I want to get done? And that makes me so happy because sometimes it's, I want to do yoga, or I want to write this blog that I haven't written, or I want to tackle this case that I've been kind of like, putting to the side. The 3 things, just to create that intention in your head that I want to get these 3 things done, literally makes you get 3 things that make you the happiest done. That's number one efficiency, because now you just got your biggest goals in that week, what mattered to you the most on a day-to-day. And then so that's one thing. The second thing is I have on Microsoft, there's called a Microsoft to-do list, which I've made all of my lawyers and staff and myself install. You can have it on your phone and on your computer. What it is, I could wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my God, like, I didn't call this person, or I didn't email this person. Immediately I grab my phone and I plug it into my to-do list. And I set a reminder to remind me the next day at 1 p.m. That way I never miss anything. So that's the second thing. A lot of efficiency is remembering what you need to do and not forgetting it, because you lose a lot of time forgetting and remembering, and then stressing about forgetting and remembering. And the third thing regarding becoming efficient is to just write down what your priorities are. Like my priorities are my daughter. How many hours a week am I going to spend on her? I literally write that down. 20 hours on my daughter, minimum 3 hours on exercising. And then I'm like, okay, so 3 hours, I can do 20 minutes in the morning, I can do 2 yoga sessions, or I can do 1 big hike. Bam, done, right? 30 hours on work. What are the hours? 5 from, for me, it's from 12 to 5. And then if I need another 5 hours, I can do it over the weekend or add an hour to each day. A lot of it is literally just write it down. take it from your head, put it on the paper, and you'll get it done. That was a long answer, but I have other tips, but those are my top three.
Thanks for that. So another question here is, you were talking about different methods and efficiency. And so once you sort of established and got your initial success there, did you can you change the method that you were doing, or were you continuing to keep that method and work on improving the efficiency?
I find that the biggest ingredient to my success as a lawyer, there are two things: not being afraid and being efficient. And the more efficient and efficiency doesn't mean me being efficient, is hiring people who are experts and already know something. So if you want to learn something on your own, like as a business owner, for example, I had to learn how to do SEO, how to do accounting, what accountant to hire, how to do HR, how to hire people, how to fire people. I spent a lot of time learning that because I thought I was the only person who could do that. But I was so wrong. Like, the one thing that I've changed is take advantage of other professionals and experts, get their knowledge, and delegate as much as you can. The more that I delegate, the more I get somebody in charge of HR, somebody in charge of accounting, this and that. The more time I get to myself to do my projects. So in order to even think about what projects I want to do, I need to delegate the mundane tasks that I don't want to do, such as looking at my expense sheets or things like that. So I think business-wise, my business life is a practice on how to become more efficient. And as lawyers, as paralegals, as support staff, that's one of the things that I feel a lot of leaders don't talk about, but it's one of the biggest ingredients to my success.
Now, you're talking a lot about the business side here, and I think certainly from I'm thinking back to law school, we had maybe very limited. You learned a lot about theory of the law. But what can you share about? I know you have a very successful blog, for example. You were mentioning SEO and other concepts like that. What can you share about developing your business and marketing and networking that my paralegal students can pick up on?
A really interesting thing that happened, I was doing, like, when I was developing my firm, when I was single, I was working till midnight. I was working, in the morning till like 5 or 6 as a lawyer, and I'd come home from 7 p.m. until midnight. I would write blogs, and I would write about legal things and information. And sometimes the blogs that I was writing were not very accurate because I was so junior as a lawyer, and it was brought to my attention a couple of times that I needed to edit them. But what really broke things through, funny enough, is I started writing this blog about my own vulnerabilities, my life as a lawyer, and what I've been through, which I just touched upon earlier. And it was called Secret Life of a Lawyer series. That became hugely popular. It got the most views I've had out of any other blog I've done. And because I was writing it on my website, it created a lot of traffic to my website. And then my website skyrocketed. So as a lawyer or as a business person, if you nowadays, I feel like if you really want to go out there and do well, is to be vulnerable and be honest and be very giving. So at the beginning, I've actually never spent money on advertising. The way that we've been getting clients is by giving a lot of information, revealing who we are as people, not just lawyers. Like, here, I'm a vulnerable person with all these problems, and I do well at what I do. I'm not perfect. So that kind of brings an honesty element to things that makes our client want to approach us, because they're already going through a tough time. They don't want to be judged, and they want people who are confident enough, who can be good lawyers and people at the same time. So, but I do know that the future of any successful business is online. What I did different back then was that I only focused on online presence. I didn't really rely on word of mouth or traditional advertising or anything like that. I just started blogging and writing about myself, about my business, about everything. And nowadays, as you can see, like in the awards and things like that, the exposure that we're getting digitally through these awards is insane. After that Globe and Mail article came out, the amount of inquiries we've had has tripled, and we're actually like turning people away. So I would say, like, if you want to be super smart and almost guarantee a successful future, put your eggs in the internet marketing basket, because that's where we all go nowadays to look for anybody. So
Now you have a huge amount of different awards. So what is the one accomplishment that you're most proud of in your success thus far?
I think the ultimate one, this is going to be this is going to be announced on Monday, but I was able to become one of the rising stars of Canada. It's like the legal rising star of Canada. There's a very prestigious publication, Lexpert, I don't know if you've heard of it or not, who named me as a rising star. And all through, even before law school, like, that was my biggest dream, to become a rising star. And when I actually applied for that award, I was watching that award for a while, but what I noticed was that that award was almost exclusive to big firms, partners, corporate lawyers. Like, there were like about 10 big corporate firms that consistently had their lawyers rank for those awards. And I had never seen a family lawyer or like an independent run for the awards. It was usually big firms. So when I applied for them, I kind of like assumed that I'm not going to get it, because you go in front of 36 different very senior lawyers and judges who are looking at your resume, and they're going to, like, pick you or not pick you. And being an independent lawyer and a family lawyer and making that ranking was just such a huge honor that I'm still kind of speechless. And actually, now that you ask, here is I just got the magazine. That's me on the cover, actually, which is really cool, on a bunch of mattresses. So there you go. I just received that today. I'm not supposed to say it, but it's coming out on Monday, so whatever.
Congratulations on the award. The cover looks fantastic there as well, and so much success that you've attained there. And I think it all a lot of it goes back to having this different approach there that you went on and took the risk and were not afraid to do so. I see another question here about preparing for cases. Now, do you have any? Now, I know right now, at least in Ontario, paralegals don't have scope for family law, but so perhaps maybe you could talk about what your approach is when you take on a case that ends up going to litigation, let's say. So we've talked a bit about mediation, but how do you deal with it when you know it's going to go to the courtroom?
You mean like the strategy that I follow when something's going to
Yeah,
court?
how to prepare for a case
Oh.
and when you're going for that, or maybe even any tips for questioning or submissions or anything along those lines.
It really depends on your personality. I'm a huge improviser. I love being on my feet, and somebody asks me a question, and I like to, like, hit them back with an answer right away. And I have, like, my partner Ari, who's like highly academic, and he goes to court with like 100-page written argument, and he just starts reading from it. And he's got like I don't know if your students are familiar with what a book of authority is. Yeah, so like his books of authority are like this thick, and mine are common sense is the biggest precedent of all. That's literally what I tell the judge. I just say, I don't need case law, common sense, judge. So preparing for me personally for my cases is really, to me, I'm very in like big picture. What kind of story do I want to tell the judge to make him or her understand where I'm coming from and where my client is coming from? What's the image that I want to give to the court? And what's the big picture? I try not to get into small details, although as a lawyer you really need to be good with remembering the small details. As soon as you say one thing wrong, now you're misleading the court, and you're going to get a very bad reputation with judges who consistently remind us. You make one mistake in front of us, we go in the back room and we talk about you, and then you get a reputation within the judges. So what I do is, I have a really good memory. I read things and I try to remember things as accurately as I can. before I go to court, I have a point form argument because I don't like reading from something. I believe in like looking at the judge straight in the eye, having a conversation and being convincing. So I have a point form that I refer to here and there, but 90% of my time is just like looking at the judge and talking to the judge. And when it comes to the hardest part of any trial is cross-examination, is catching people in lies. And that's an art that has to be perfected by many years of just practicing it. Like there's no formula into how to best cross-examine people, but in order, like in a nutshell, in order to win anything or any case is to outsmart your opponent and outsmart the judge. Because if you don't do or get the judge to agree with you because you're just as smart as the judge. So if you can get there where like a judge believes you and you've already outsmarted your opponent, you're gonna win your case. How you get there, for everybody is different. For my partner is to read all the cases and put down all the details and read his written arguments because he doesn't want to miss anything. For me is to just be very like, I don't know, like maybe charming and body language and energies. So it just depends on the person.
Right, and I guess you would say if you're not sort of the person who's good at improvising, then don't start doing it just because it's been successful for someone else.
Yeah, yeah. If you're not a good improviser, just prepare as much as you can. Have your written argument. A lot of judges like written arguments. You can hand one up to them, and in as you know, like in a lot of cases, some judges can't decide on the spot, so they need to go away and think about it, and they take your written argument with them and they read it after everybody's gone. So both approaches work. It just and they can be just as effective as each other. Just like some judges love to read and they don't want to see your face, and some judges hate to read and they want to hear what you have to say. So there's space for every type of lawyer out there. Don't think because you're not like me or like you're not going to be successful. I think you can be highly successful as long as you really milk your talents and you believe in yourself and your strategy.
Now, one of the things, obviously, in 2020 is COVID-19 and the impact it's had on our justice system. And what can you share about? I don't know if you've had any trials or even client meetings now on Zoom versus. I know we were mentioning the Zoom fatigue earlier. Is there any different approach in preparing for something online versus something in person now?
Mm. I one of the things I found, like we're doing all of our hearings over the phone now, and now they're like switching to like Zoom finally, or like some Teams or something. One of the things that I found was there's a lot less stress because you're sitting in your home or your office and a call comes in and you're making your submissions over the phone. You can't see people's faces or body language, and that's nice because you don't like. I've been in front of judges who are like just shaking their heads, and your opponent is just like like grinning or like throwing up their hands, or sometimes like banging their hands on the table. And sometimes there's a gallery of people behind you and somebody asks a question that you don't know the answer to, and you get embarrassed. And that does not exist when you're doing a phone hearing. You're talking, they can't interrupt you, you don't know any sort of reactions, and you just say your piece. And also there's a lot less interruptions because people can't see each other, so they're not rude to each other, like they wait until you finish what you have to say. So in that regard, I actually think COVID's done a number of good things on a lot of lawyers' mental health because the level of stress is lower. But what I miss about it is the courtroom is your theater. It's this like beautiful area where you're meeting these great minds and you're doing these live dynamic debates, sometimes like super academic and nerdy, which I love. And you have all these people behind you who are listening, and then they come and introduce themselves, or they say, I agreed or disagreed with what you did. So I miss both. But what I think, what I'm really excited about is that finally, after being forced to try this thing that we refuse to do, especially our judges who sometimes didn't even know how to use an email. Now we've almost all become experts at doing virtual things and doing remotely. And now that we have this experience, what happens when all of the restrictions are out? Are we going to find that fine balance where, for example, like we're going to go to court for really important long things, but then we're not going to have to go to court for these like petty 5-minute applications that are going to waste so much of our clients' time in us having to travel and sit there and wait to be called over like a 5-minute consent order that could easily happen over the phone as I pick, as I work on another file and then the call comes in. So I really think the future is bright, and I can't wait to see what happens once this is all over.
Now, are there any other questions from the students? I want to take one last chance there to see if there's anything coming in here. So Leena, what advice do you have for my students, particularly my female students who are looking to go into the profession, about what's out there and succeeding, and certainly being such a amazing role model like yourself, and all the success that you've received and are going to receive on Monday there? What can you share with my students?
With the ladies, don't be afraid of who you are. I'm not gonna tell you that, like when you're applying for articling, you need to sit in front of, especially if you want to work at big law firms, that you can, sit in front of somebody and say, I love, this is actually what I did say at a big law firm interview. They said, what do you love? What do you love? And I said, I love belly dancing. Oh my God, it's so bad. And then they said, what are your pet peeve? And I said, bacon. And like everybody loves bacon. So yeah, I didn't get that job. That was bad. So yeah, like at the at the beginning, if you're trying to get a job and work at a big firm, you may have to, I'm not going to say you have to pretend to be someone else. I'm going to say you have to focus on being a good lawyer, and perhaps, and I hate to say this, but not reveal too much of the person who's underneath. And this makes me it's painful to say it, because I really believe if we all allowed each other to be who we are, we'd be so much more successful. But right now in this environment, we are in an environment where the law and the legal industry is still monopolized by big firms. So at the beginning, follow, I hate to say this, follow the crowd, and try not to stick out too much, because in a lot of times when you're articling, when I was articling, I was basically a beggar. And a typical saying is, beggars can't be choosers. I couldn't be a chooser. I just had to get a job to get my foot in. But once I got my foot in, after a couple years, I couldn't wait to show who I was. I couldn't wait to go out on my own. I was afraid, and you always are going to be, regardless of what you're doing. But once I got my foot in the door, I said, now let me show you that I don't have to be who you want me to be, and I can prove that I can be even more successful than you are. So female lawyers, be who you are, but just pause that while you're articling, or even maybe for a year after. And if you want to have kids, don't be afraid of having kids. If you work in an environment that doesn't allow you to flourish because you had kids, and doesn't allow you to have a work-life balance, get out. There's thousands of opportunities once you have a year or two of law experience under your belt. 1,000, maybe more, thousands opportunities that would welcome you. Being a mother, or having to work part-time, or having a disability, or having mental illness, doesn't matter. I love people who, like in my firm, we actually actively go after people who don't fit the mold that a big law firm wants you to fit. So don't be afraid, but just pay your dues at the beginning.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciated all the advice and learning about your incredible and very successful journey. Perhaps to end here, if there's any other final words of wisdom that you can share, I think not just for the female students. I saw Adam there pointing out, what about us too? So any final words of wisdom that you can share for my students? And if anyone wants to reach out to you or learn more about your firm or your blog, perhaps you can share some of those details. think we lost the audio, Leena. I don't know if. There we go. I can hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, my battery finished, but I'm just on a different microphone. Every bad quality that we think we have has a shadow good quality. So I, for example, had a lot of anxiety, but my anxiety resulted in me becoming becoming a decently successful lawyer. So my advice is take whatever you think is wrong with you and look at what good can be achieved with what you call is wrong with you. You know, like if you've experienced depression, that's going to allow you to relate to so many more people than somebody who's never experienced that. If you came from a war-torn background like I did, you know, like I grew up in the Persian Gulf War, and you experienced oppression, what can you do to make yourself and your client's life and, you know, the society in general better? I found that I was really limiting myself by saying I'm not good at this. I've been called crazy, I've been called irrational, I've been called so many skank, slut, unprofessional, you know, like I've been ridiculed in and out. And I remember as long as I internalized that, I really did myself a disservice because I believed in, believed that, what I was doing was wrong. But when I actually started writing about my anxiety, writing about my depression, writing about the war, writing about how much I love to praise my body and be, a confident female, I only became more empowered, and I only attracted other people who related to me and became empowered because of what I was doing. So I think a good part of being a lawyer is to acknowledge what you think is a weakness and see how you can turn that into a strength, because every weakness has a strength within it. You just have to find what it is.
Perfect. So thank you so much once again. It's a little earlier there out in the West Coast there. So I wish you the best for the rest of your day, and all the best in continuing all of your success there. And thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much. See you guys later. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you so much, Leena.
Leena.
No
Thank
problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, JP. See you
Bye,
at 6
everyone.
in a bit.
Yeah,
Bye,
thank you.
guys.